Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. My notes will open up. So I'm sure everyone here has heard about the tragedy that happened, I believe, yesterday in DC with the plane crash. Someone we know was actually on that plane. One of my Sunday school students, her name was Asra Hussein. So she was from our community in Indiana, and she had just got married a year and a half ago. And her husband is actually a friend of my cousin's, but she passed away on that flight. So please join me in the recitation of Surah Fatiha. You know, when I was young, I was about 12 years old, and I was at this Muslim youth camp, and the speaker was saying that when we're born, we're basically placed in a line with everyone that we're born at the same time with, and we're walking blindfolded. And we don't know if our next step will be on earth or will be in our grave. And we don't know how many steps we have. We don't know how many breaths we have. One of the companions was asked, he was asked a really interesting question. He said, if you knew you were going to die at Asr time tomorrow, which is also interesting. They used to talk about time in relation to prayers, which is something we can all work on. That the prayer did not work into their day worked around the prayers. The 5 prayers were the 5 poles, the rest of the hours were like orbiting around the prayers. Right? So even their time was in relation to prayers. So a companion was asked, just reflecting on the tragedy that's obviously fallen us, what would you do if you knew you were going to die at Asr tomorrow? And the companion responded, exactly what I'm doing right now. That he was literally living his life like every breath was his last life. There was a righteous person, and if anyone wants to write this down, this has been really helpful in my life. Even if you have your phones, you can just take a quick note of this. But there's a righteous person that said, every time he prays, right? Every time he prays, he imagines the Kaaba is in front of him. He imagines what? This is going to be interactive. It's not a lecture. I actually don't even like this format. We're just a group. I'm a little higher up, but that's it. Okay. Spiritually, you guys are probably much higher up, so we're just going to loosen up and be together, okay? So the man said that when I pray, in front of me, I imagine what? The Kaaba. He says, I imagine I'm standing on the Sirat. The Sirat in the hereafter mirrors the Sirat al-Mustaqim of this life. The straight path of this life is a reflection of actually the Sirat of the hereafter. The Sirat of the hereafter is as thin as a piece of paper. It's as sharp as a sword. And every human being must cross it before entering paradise. Except it's suspended over hell. As thin as a piece of paper, as sharp as a sword, it's extended over hellfire. And you have to cross it. One of the great companions, Abdullah bin Rawah, radiallahu anhu, who died in the Battle of Mu'tah. He was a great poet warrior of Islam. Even dying as a shaheed, one of the early Muhajir companions, and the general of the Prophet ﷺ, he was still crying because he was thinking about the Sirat. And he says, I don't know what will be my state when I cross the Sirat. So this man would imagine, talking about living in the moment, he would imagine the Kaaba is in front of him, he's standing on the Sirat, suspended over hellfire. He said, I would imagine to my right side is heaven, to my left side is hell, and behind me is my grave. And above me is the angel of death. So who can do it with me? In front of him is? Standing on top of? On the right side is? Left side? Behind him? Above him? Angel of death. And he said, I would pray every prayer with the feeling that after my second salam, the angel of death would swoop over me, throw me in my grave, and I would enter heaven or hell based on that one prayer. He said, this is how I prepared for every prayer. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to be ready for the moment that He takes us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as one of our righteous people said, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the gift of allowing us to wake up before we are awoken. You hear me? One of our righteous people said, all of us will be awoken. And most people don't wake up till the grave. The believer hopes to wake up before we are awoken. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to wake up when we still have life to move. You know, we say that the people of the grave, they are jealous of the footsteps they hear above them. Because they know even if that person above them is not living a righteous life, they still have life and they can turn. So we say to Ya Allah, Allahumma, Allahumma, Ruddani, alayka, Raddan Jamila. Ya Allah, return us to you with a beautiful return. And please keep our sisters Asra and anyone else who passed away, but please specifically keep our sister Asra Hussein in your du'as. You know, someone said online that she had so much more life to give and it was untimely. The reality is there's no untimely death. And the one who dies had nothing left to give. Because that was the moment Allah had written before they were created. So she died at the time Allah had decreed. It is only from our perspective that it seems early, late, or untimely. This was her time, and may Allah allow us to be ready when our time comes. All right, so I want everyone, do you have access to Wi-Fi? Not so strong. Okay, so I'll read it instead. I won't ask everyone to get on. So it may not work that way. I'm going to begin with a poem. This poem has changed my life. I want to start off with something just intriguing. How many people here hate poetry? Raise your hand.
Hate?
I'm okay. Oh, okay, sorry. Is that a strong word? Didn't mean to be crass.
First time.
I didn't mean to be unpoetic. How many people have a strong aversion to the art form known as poetry? Is that softer? One person only? Okay. How many people have never really connected to poetry? All right, cool. So it's a poetic crowd, which is nice. Some of you guys know that I've been writing poetry and music most of my life. And for about 8 years, that was my full-time job as a songwriter. And so poetry has, for me, has always had a very central place in my life. One of my friends, you guys may know the musician Dawood Hornsby, he wrote in one of his books, he said, I write songs because I can't afford therapy, right? So poetry in our tradition has a central place. And we'll begin with this introduction. Some of you may have heard this before. So inshallah, it'll be a good reminder. Every prophet came with an art form, a science, a miracle that actually transcended the great art form or science of their time. So for example, what was Jesus or Moses' miracle? He split the sea. What did he do with the staff? Sorry, everyone together? Turned into a snake by Allah's will, right? What did the magicians do? They performed an illusion based on magic. What the scholars say is, listen to this carefully, the great art form of the time when the prophet arrives has actually reached its pinnacle in human civilization, which means that magic at the time of Moses had reached the highest form that it would ever reach. Are you all with me? Magic before and after, like the David Copperfield, the magicians of today, David Blaine, whatever, all the Davids, which is interesting actually, you realize. Huh. It's actually very interesting. They're all Jewish. And Musa alayhi salam came to know there is something there, but I don't know. And I don't mean this as a stereotype of Jews. It is interesting, but I don't have time right now because we're in the middle of the gathering. There's something there, but we have to maybe investigate. Okay, there's not any assertion anyway. But, okay, stop having epiphanies, just move on. So the art form of magic had reached a pinnacle that it would never reach again. What's interesting is, like, you know, Hegelian philosophy, they'll say that everything as time progresses, things get better, better, better. We have this assumption, like, we have the best technology, the best medicine, people before didn't, that's why people died early. We don't actually realize that sometimes human civilization recycles or resets. There is technology that existed in the time of Pharaoh that we cannot approach today, correct? We still don't know how they built the pyramids. Half of us don't realize why there's a Stonehenge, and the rest of us don't know why there is one. But there's things that they have done in pre-modernity that is beyond our concept. The ancient Aztecs and Mayans had figured out astronomy that we still can't figure out today. They did it with the naked eye. So what I'm saying is there are some areas where we have so-called developed. There are many areas where we have regressed, we just don't realize it. Are you with me? The Prophet ﷺ said, my community is the best. Then the nation after, then the generation after. He's talking about humankind is diluted. So don't think that's just spiritually. The Egyptians had something that we don't have today. And that knowledge was lost, and then now we're refinding it. Are you all with me? There was medicine in the time of Jesus, Isa alayhi salam, that had reached a level of holistic healing that we are still discovering today. So when a prophet came and the people had mastered the art form to the point that it had reached an all-time pinnacle in human civilization, then the prophet came with a miracle. The practitioners and the masters of that art form recognized that this is otherworldly. Are you with me? So who are the first followers of Musa alayhi salam? Why the magicians? Because they recognize what? My sister in the back.
Because they recognized they couldn't have done what he just did.
Right, but what if they were not the greatest magicians of all time? Why would that not have worked then?
So they would have maybe thought that was another form of magic that they just haven't achieved yet.
Yeah, they'd be like, oh, that's the next level of magic. Because they knew everything about magic, they were like, no, it's not like this person has upgraded their magic, they've leveled up beyond us. This isn't magic. You have to be a master to know that. So when Jesus brings the dead back to life with Allah's power, if there were people who were like, look, I'm a level 2 doctor, healer, they could be like, oh, it's just a better healer. They were like, no, we know everything about healing. This is not healing. So they became the followers of Jesus. What is the permanent, universal miracle of all the miracles of the Prophet, splitting the moon and all of that? What is the great miracle of Rasulullah? What art form did the Quran come to transcend? Poetry. So how could this ummah not care about poetry? When it is literally our greatest miracle. So some people will say, but the Quran talks against poets and this is not poetry. It is because it is so powerful that Allah had to distinguish His eternal word with it. It's not because it's weak. It's because it's important. You know, like I'm not at all equating this, but you guys know about the whole Kendrick Drake, like Kendrick destroyed him. Okay. If you don't think so, you're like, whatever. Sorry, Toronto people. I didn't know we had Canadians here. Sorry, my apologies to you and your culture. But what I'm saying is, you have to think of something as a threat to have beef. Now, not equating that to this, but if the poets were not powerful, it would not be necessary to distinguish that the eternal word of God is not poetry. People were starting to equate it with poetry. But you know the people who knew it was not poetry? Even some of the enemies of Islam, they were the master poets of Makkah. Language had reached a pinnacle in Jahili era poetry that it has never reached to this day. Maybe the closest is like Wordsworth and Shakespeare, at least in Western civilization, but it has not gotten close to the pre-Islamic Arabs. Are you all with me? Are you guys with me? So poetry is central in our deen. It's not sound like fluffy, are you into the arts? Like I like ballet, I like poetry. Poetry is different. Appreciation of poetry led the Quraysh to an appreciation of the Quran. That is why the Quraysh are called kafirs. The ones who rejected that were called kafirs. A kafir in Arabic, kafara means to cover. A kafir was actually a farmer back in the day because they took a seed and they covered it. The people who rejected the Prophet, it wasn't that they just didn't believe in the Prophet. it would be pretty harsh for them to go to hell just because they believed in their own religion. They actually, because the miracle of the Quran hit them so different than it hits us, there was no way they didn't know it was from Allah. Unless they were not mastered in language. That's why when people would come into Makkah, the Quraysh would tell them put cotton in their ears. Because if they heard it, they would believe. There's a very funny story in the Sirah. Abu Sufyan and Abu Jahl. Abu Sufyan is greatest enemy at the time, along with Abu Jahl, Abu Lahab, and others. And Abu Sufyan is like sneaking outside of Dar al-Arqam, where the Prophet ﷺ would receive revelation and share it with the companions. And he's overhearing the Quran late at night. And he's just mesmerized. He can't stop listening. And then he sees a shadow and he thinks it's a Muslim. So he like stiffens up. And it's Abu Jahl. And Abu Jahl was listening from the other side of the wall. And there's like this awkward like, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? No, I'm not doing anything. Oh, see you later. But they were like, that you could not be mesmerized. So when we go into poetry then, let us realize that the centuries where the Muslim Ummah left poetry actually aligns with the decline of the Muslim Ummah. We always think about it like, oh, we lost military battles and we didn't stay up with them with science, Europe got ahead. It is when we stopped having an imagination as a community, we stopped having the creative ability to interpret, from that comes empathy. If you see language as black and white, you will see emotions as black and white. Sheikh Hamza Yusuf says, language is not only how we express, it's not just output, it is input. If you don't have a language of nuance, you will not think with nuance. If in your mind everything is halal and haram, everything is halal and haram. If you think everything is good and evil, everything becomes good and evil. If everything is with us or against us, America, greatest country in the world against everyone else, you will see through that broken prism. But the more you understand metaphor, the more when someone makes a mistake, you will use the power of metaphor and analogy to try to understand where they're coming from. If you can bend language, your heart will expand. If you cannot, the Quran will even sound to you one-dimensional because our language has no depth. One of our scholars, Ahmed Bamba, the great scholar of West Africa, he says our Islam has to move from solid, liquid to gas. He says Islam, the beginning, the 5 pillars, the rules, that's like a frozen lake. It is beautiful, but it has no depth. Then you have Iman that you add to your Islam. And you start not just following the externals of deen, but you start feeling it. And he says now the frozen lake begins to melt. Now there's depth. What's different between liquid and solid? It can take the form of any container it's poured into without losing itself. It can bend, there's depth. That's when Islam becomes poetic. There's depth in it. He says, but you're still on the ground. And then finally, when you go from Iman to Ihsan, the spiritual dimension, which is all based, you can't go there without Islam. Islam, then Iman builds on it, then Ihsan. Then it's like that liquid begins to bubble and then it lifts up as gas. And if somebody is interested in this, when you pray, standing up represents Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. It's like a waterfall. And when you hit sujood, that's when we're closest to Allah, that's when we lift up. And then we actually physically lift up in prayer. So our Islam needs depth. So with that, I introduce to you a poem that saved my life. A poem that took me out of years of grief, took me out of years of stress about the world. It allowed me to understand my own pain, and it allowed me to find the light in the darkness, not seeking light away from darkness. Are you all with me? This poem is called Joy and Sorrow by Khalil Gibran. How many people have read this poem before? Okay. A few people? Mashallah. I'm excited so many people are hearing it for the first time. So Khalil Gibran is the most read poet of the last 100 years. He's a Lebanese Christian poet. I actually teach his works at our space in Fairfax. but this is my favorite poem by him. A woman came to him and said, "Speak to us of joy and sorrow." And the he here is like a prophetic character. And everyone from Gandhi, Martin Luther King, the Beatles, Johnny Cash, everyone read this poem. Malcolm X, everyone. And it's interesting, he names the prophet character Al-Mustafa, even though he's a Christian Lebanese poet, right? So it's directly inspired by the Prophet ﷺ. So a woman comes to this prophet character and says, "Speak to us of joy and sorrow." And then he answered, "Your joy is your sorrow unmasked." So if you took your sorrow and you took the mask off, you'd find your joy. Then he goes on. "And the same well from where your laughter rises was often filled with your tears." So the place that's bringing you joy now, that same thing once brought you tears. And how else can it be? The deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. Listen to these words carefully. The deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. What does that mean to you? The deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. Can you introduce yourself to?
My name is Sara. So when I hear it,
Sara is your name?
yeah, Sara.
Yes. Thank you.
When I hear the words, I think that it helps you understand that.
Sara?
Yeah. Sorry, I speak really softly. So my name is Sara, and so I was saying that I feel like you can't truly appreciate proper happiness and joy at such a great depth until you experience sorrow that lets you appreciate those happy moments in a bit more, like not just in a shallow or superficial way, but in a way where you can truly appreciate it like in your soul.
Has that ever happened to you? And when you speak here, don't feel rushed. We're not waiting to get back to the speaker. You are the speaker.
It's
Just
a
talk,
lot of
relax.
pressure.
No. You don't have to share more. I'm
No,
saying-
I feel you.
You've said it intellectually, which I agree with.
Yeah.
Tell me about your experience. Have you ever, you don't say specifics if you don't want to, but have you found that to be true in your life?
Across many moments, across many challenges, I found that to be painfully true. But it's something that I think I carry with me in those happy moments, and knowing, like having that understanding, it helps me during those darker moments. Because I know it's like really cringy, but like, you know, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. For me, I see it as what doesn't truly, you know, end things for you, will make things easier for you, inshallah.
The great poet and philosopher Kanye West. I know he's looking for other people. Okay. So there are levels to this, right? So there's a level where you can say that, you know, in moments of pain, know that it gives us greater capacity for joy. But then those really painful moments hit. And you can get so crippled in the darkness and the despair of pain that this just becomes a cool one-line poem. What I encourage you to do is to try to unwrap this meaning through experience. To actually actualize this. I've talked about this in the past. Recipes don't feed people's hunger. You have to take the recipe. This applies to every aspect of our life, every aspect of our deen. Quoting one-liner from the Prophet ﷺ may not actually heal us. Quoting verses of Quran may not get us through life. We have to take the idea, the lesson, the reminder from a recipe, and we have to cook it. We have to taste it, and we have to feed other people with it. You go to you're starving and you go to a farmer and you say, I'm starving. I'm literally about to die of hunger. And they give you a class on Agriculture 101. Thank you, but I'm still starving. You get what I'm saying? So we can't just intellectualize through life, because then when times get really tough, there's no food there to nourish us. So what I encourage you to do, and I'm speaking in metaphor, because also this is not just about reading poetry. What helped me in life, because I went through and I still go through some pretty tough times, is it's very helpful, and I see this in the life of the Prophet ﷺ. I see this in the companions. The people that were children of this peak of poetry that they lived in. It was in their air. The Arabs, why did they send their children out to the desert? To escape the disease of Makkah, but also to learn the language of the Bedouins. It was very important to them that they speak well, they're eloquent. So the Quran, it was meant to be that it would be not revealed to Rasulullah ﷺ himself, but also through him, it was revealed to this civilization directly. Are you with me? It is, so what I'm saying is, it is important to not just read poetry, but to think poetically, to approach life poetically. My entire life, I think through metaphors. Like if I'm saying a lot of metaphors, when I hear Muslim scholars say Islam, Iman, Ihsan is like solid, liquid, and gas, it is much more profound to me than, one of the philosophers, Thoreau, he said, if you speak about religion too directly, you kill it. It can get heavy-handed. But look at the Quran, how beautifully it speaks about everything, but you have to have an appreciation for language. So what I encourage us to do is, take this idea again. Khalil Gibran is saying that pain carves into our being so we can be filled with more joy. Someone else unwrap that for me. You can give me the idea or give me an experience. I'd love to hear both. My sister in the back.
When I hear that, I think of moments when...
Could someone pass this? Can you just pass the mic back? Can you pass the mic? And if you could introduce yourself again.
Assalamualaikum, my name is Khadija, and when I'm unwrapping that, what comes to mind is when people cry from happiness. Oftentimes, or every time I've cried from happiness, the underlying emotion was initially sorrow. For example, one time I saw my mom after 9 months, and I was so happy, I cried. But under those happy tears were all the times I was so sad and missing her. And there's many other examples too, so I think oftentimes when you're crying from happiness, it's kind of like that line in the poem. It's like you experience this deep sadness or a level of sadness that allows for you to feel that happiness and creates room for that happiness.
There was a poet who was once asked, and you guys know George Harrison from the Beatles? His first album was based on this line. It comes from Eastern spirituality, but a poet was once asked, give me a line that could get you through the greatest joys and the greatest hardships. It would allow you to receive the greatest joy and the greatest hardship. And he says, all things shall pass. That's where the first album, George Harrison, his best album, is called All Things Shall Pass. That when times are good, just be prepared. It will pass. And when times are bad or tough, we don't say bad actually, we say a test. It could be that the tough times are good for us, and the times of ease are not. They said that the punishment of Pharaoh was ease, and the blessing of the prophets is difficulty. Imam Ali radiallahu anhu said, I prefer moments of constriction to moments of expansion, because I know the promise of Allah is true. فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا. So when I'm in moments of ease, I know the hardship is coming, because the verse is repeated. So you don't end up at ease. The hardship comes back. And when I'm in moments of hardship, I'm at peace, because I know all that is coming is ease. If you're in the Meccan period, you know Medina's coming. You know it's coming. And you believe in the promise of Allah. But when you're in a lot of ease, there's like that suspense. There's that that tension in the air. Allah's promise is true. This shall also pass. There's a sister here that was going to speak. In the back.
Oh yeah, that's me.
Yeah, but
I don't know where you are.
it's okay.
Oh, that's okay.
That's fine.
Could you just introduce your name, please?
Oh, Mariam?
Okay, Maddie.
Okay. It makes what you shared makes me think of empathy, in that if you go through some sort of emotional pain that is extremely, extremely difficult, even traumatic, and then you meet someone else at a later point in your life where you can really feel on like a deeper level what they're feeling. Like you're kind of making a decision to either like use wisdom that you've gained from that experience to try and help that person, or if you like haven't really healed and developed yourself, then you'll just deflect on them. So it's, or you might inflict it upon someone else. So I think that's kind of what it makes me think of. Like we don't choose what happens to us, but like where's our free will coming in?
Right.
It can come in the form of empathy.
Thank you so much, Marian. If you don't mind, maybe you could pass the mic forward now. So I think that's a really, really critical point, the connection of going through joy and sorrow and the empathy that comes from it.
Our dear brother Omar, who was organizing a lot of this, he had mentioned to me that to try to mention personal stories as much as possible. I won't go too much into detail, but my family who's here, my close friends know this. The last year, it just passed. Even when I came here, the last time I was teaching, I was still in the middle of it. I went through the hardest year of my life. And there's a lot of stuff happening, a lot of anxiety and things that started after Gaza. And it was a pain that was unimaginable. It would be 24 hours a day for about 8 months. And when you go through things like that, you do feel like you're being carved out. At times you feel like you may not actually survive it. But it changes you. And when you think about the fact that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, going back to our sister Mariam's point, that he was the mercy to mankind, that was also because he had tasted a flavor of every type of pain that any human being could go through. You hear me or no? There's a Hindu boy in India who ended up becoming Muslim. When he was about 9, he met a Muslim imam. And this really affected this boy. He was an orphan in India, and like I said, he was Hindu at the time. And the imam said, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was an orphan. The kid began to cry. And he said, what happened? He said, of course he was an orphan. And he says, how? He says, only another orphan could get my pain. So empathy, as one of our teachers taught us, he said, sympathy is to be next to someone, like symmetry. So I'm still not I'm with you, but I'm still outside of you. I'm next to you, and pathos is feeling. So by being next to you, I'm trying to feel what you're feeling. M means to enter. The pathos is the feeling of someone else. So empathy is to try to enter someone's heart and feel the actual pain, like whatever they're quivering and shaking from, you're trying to embody that. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he spoke to people, he didn't feel for them. He actually felt what was inside of them. So when he spoke, it hit their heart because he was already in their heart. Right? Now this gets me to, I guess, for sake of time, what may be the conclusion. There's a lot more I would want to share, inshallah. We'll have other opportunities to do that. But one of the key points of this poem is that pain is not meaningless. The world is not this cold, dark, ennui, meaningless world that is just there to sadistically inflict pain. Are you understanding me? Even when the world is run by sadistic authoritarian powers, they themselves are sadistic, but the divine decree is not. This is essential to stay sane in an insane world. To stay sensitive in a world that will either lead you to apathy or will overload your senses and lead you to an emotional breakdown. The only survival there is not to reject the occurrences of the world. It is to understand them. It is to see the apparent causes and then to understand the divine decree. This is very important. So pain has purpose. We may see it in this world or we may not. Rasulullah ﷺ described it very clearly when he said, a believer will not even experience a prick of a thorn, but that they will be forgiven through it. And in one of the elaborated versions of the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ actually mentions ham, that a believer will not experience anxiety. The actual word for anxiety is used, because the Prophet ﷺ used to suffer from anxiety and prolonged grief, to the extent that one of his daily du'as was relief from anxiety and grief. Ya farij al-ham, ya kashif al-gham, ya mali abdi yaghfir wa yarham. He had different versions of that. That was a daily dua of Rasulullah ﷺ. He was in so much pain. Talking about pain and joy. His greatest pain led to his greatest joys. The year of sorrow, greatest pain. Khadija radiallahu anha passes away. Abu Talib passes away. He is orphaned again. They were like his mother and father figure, on top of being his wife and uncle. He is orphaned again, Rasulullah ﷺ. And then Isra al-Miraj. The world broke him, Allah rose him to heaven. That is actually what's happening to people of Gaza. We are seeing the years of sorrow. For them is decades of sorrow. We are not seeing their Isra al-Miraj. But trust me, Jerusalem was actually the destination of the Isra. Don't think that place doesn't have Mi'rajes also. That is what the Dome of the Rock commemorates. That's where the Mi'raj happened from. You don't think the children of Jerusalem get Mi'rajes? That's where it comes from, in a worldly plane. But what we have to understand is from the greatest pain came the greatest joy, as Khalil Gibran talks about. Another example of that, the Prophet ﷺ, his greatest pain from the early years is when the skies became silent and he didn't receive revelation. Some say 6 months, some say up to 2.5 years. No revelation. He thought Allah was upset with him. Think about it, you're receiving messages, just a minute. You're sitting there and then you feel a ringing in your head, you begin to sweat, and suddenly there's Quran. To get used to that, letters from heaven coming in real time to guide you through your days and nights, and then there's silence. And the Prophet ﷺ believes he's done something wrong. And 6 months to 2.5 years pass. He's in so much pain, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals Surah Duha, which is midday, the meaning of Duha. So he emotionally went from midnight to midday in a single moment. Another example, he was in so much, this goes back to the height of pain. Some of you have heard this before. One of my friends and teachers, Haji Shah Mahmoud from Lanturna, he teaches this. He says that in Arabic, Bakhiyun nafsaka, which is used to describe the pain of the Prophet ﷺ, is used to describe what? I can't hear you guys. It's used to describe what? Bakhiyun nafsaka. In the verse, Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim, لَعَلَّكَ بَاخِيٌ نَفْسَكَ أَلَّا يَكُونُوا مُؤْمِنِينَ. It may be that you're going to kill yourself from grief and your people won't believe. The Prophet ﷺ had carried such a burden. He actually had seen angels. After the Isra al-Miraj, I don't know if we've reflected on this, he actually saw heaven and hell. Are you all with me? Do you understand if someone is the most empathic human being that's ever lived? He loves people more than himself. And he has now seen hell and he's seen people rushing to jump in. And he can't convince them. He had taken all of that personally. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described in the Quran, his pain was at such a level, Bakhiyun nafsaka doesn't mean just kill yourself. It means to take a knife and to slaughter an animal instead of cutting their vein, to cut through every nerve in their spinal cord until the animal is cut through all the way through, but through the spine. And that is the word that described the pain of the Prophet ﷺ. Where did the ease come from then? Where did the joy come from? It came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala aligning the Prophet to himself. It's called Aqidah. Know you and know God. Do not take upon yourself what is God's. Otherwise you will live in perpetual pain, grief, and anxiety. You will never feel good about yourself. You won't feel good about the world. You will become cynical. You will become depressed. You will feel overwhelmed. And I'm saying you, I'm talking about me. I'm the guy sitting in that empty chair talking to himself. This is my therapy. But because the Prophet ﷺ was reminded in the next verse, After Allah described his predicament, Allah says to him, Inna sha'na nazila min as-sama'i ayah. If I had wanted, I would have sent from the sky a sign. If I had wanted, I would have made them all believe. They would have seen that sign and they would have believed. Meaning, this whole thing, I don't need you for people to become Muslim. If I wanted them, if the goal was Makkah becomes Muslim, I could say kun fayakun. I'm not speaking for Allah, this is the interpretation. Are you with me? But if you take upon yourself, if I take upon myself what is meant to be given to God, I will live in a frantic state because I am trying to play God. And we will crumble on that pressure. So what does that mean? In our life, we can fight for Palestine. But our emotional well-being cannot, I'm not saying that we're not going to be sad. I went through 8 months of anxiety. But we cannot be in a depressed state that we don't want to live anymore because we don't see a result. Results do not come from us. Noah alayhi salam, 950 years, had about 30 followers. Their prophets have 0 followers. And they're not failures. In any performance review, we would be called a failure by our boss, by our teachers. Because we are results oriented. Our deen is intentions oriented. If we don't recalibrate ourselves and say we have to stop being so hard on ourselves for results and just have pure intentions and work hard. It doesn't matter if we end up a janitor, a doctor, a lawyer, whatever. If we're doing it with a pure intention, we're good. There's no levels in heaven for careers. There's levels in heaven for Quran, for prayer. Those are the things we're judged by. For charity, for kindness towards children. One of the scholars said there's a level there's a door to the garden of heaven for someone that brought joy to the hearts of children. Some scholars consider that the 8th door of heaven, the hidden door. Someone that brought joy to the hearts of children. And who knows the state that Mr. Rogers passed away, but if the light entered his heart, I think he'll be the king of that door. Allah knows. But anyways, or Miss Rachel, may Allah guide Miss Rachel to Islam. She's like the queen. Anyways, one of the queens, not the two. But what I'm saying is, I have toddlers, so sorry if you guys don't know who Miss Rachel is. It's a big part of my lifestyle now. My wife and I, the GSU. Okay, I'll end with this, okay? There's 2 points. One, Aqidah is very important if we want to navigate joy and sorrow. We have to know why we are feeling sorrow. We have to know why things seem to break. One of our scholars, Sheikh Hamza, I quote Sheikh Hamza Yusuf a lot. I know people have different opinions on him, on politics. I do too. I don't agree with him on most of his political stuff. But he was the biggest influence in my life. And I'm mentioning him because I don't believe that you cancel human beings based on opinions. We take the good from our teachers and we can disagree with them. I also don't believe you blindly follow them though. The only one we blindly follow is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Everyone else is a fallible human. Are you guys with me? I'm tired of groupism. But we also cannot disregard people who are extremely impactful. And so if any of you have benefited me from today, my brain was wired by 4 scholars and he's one of them. It's the truth. And I have to be honest. So Sheikh Hamza, he was talking about this idea. Where did I leave off?
Aqidah.
Huh?
Results.
Oh, Miss Rachel? No, I didn't. I did stop there, but 1 second. It'll come back. Allahumma salli ala sayyidina.
Results.
Sorry?
Results.
You said 2 final things.
Sorry? Aqidah?
The tie down. The tie down.
Okay, no, it wasn't that. But yeah, it is Aqidah, so I'll just go from there. So the idea, will probably come back. So the idea of Aqidah is that we have to understand, as we're navigating our life, what is our relationship with Allah? How do we perceive difficulty and oh yeah, this is the line. Sheikh Hamza said, this world was not meant to be paradise. It is actually difficult so that the believer does not mistake it with paradise. It is actually meant to break you so that you desperately run back to Allah. If Allah made it too comfortable, it would facilitate heedlessness. So one of the signs that Allah has forsaken a servant is that He removes tribulation.
So when you see the bad guys winning, selling their little electric cars and literally becoming movie villains in front of us, I used to love that dude when he was talking about the home battery. The guy is crazy. I'm not a political person. I'm literally not. But that type of mentality of creating evil in the world, not politically. I'm not a left or right person. There are clowns of different colors, blue and red. But what I'm saying though is that when you see villains coming out, and some people get affected by their wealth, their success. Why are the bad guys always winning? They're smiling while our people are crying. They are not winning. We are people who have aqidah. And in Surah Al-Imran it says, do not be upset. The last 10 verses of Surah Al-Imran, do not be upset by their wealth that they parade across the land. This is their enjoyment for a short time, and their destination is the fire. But if we don't have that perspective, we will get thrown off by the dunya. Pharaoh did not win. His test, now it doesn't mean to win we have to be poor and broken and sad. No, we're not allergic to worldly success, but we don't define ultimate success with worldly success. Are you with me? And we don't lose our faith because it seems like darkness wins. The last point, inshallah, I'll end with this. I call this the metaphor of the divine surgeon. And I'm only sharing this because I kind of came up with this idea, I'm sure inspired by other teachers, but it actually was like self-medication for me. It helped me through those periods of my life where literally I didn't know if I could make it another day. It was that level of test. So this did not come from like me trying to be smart or philosophical. It came from trying to save myself with Allah's help. So just know it's coming from that place. I'll end with this. It's called the metaphor of the divine surgeon. If someone's walking in the street and they get stabbed, and if anyone has had severe anxiety, you know that it feels like a knife going through your back. Is that right or no? It feels like your nerves are actually being cut. It's like that level of pain. I have very high tolerance for pain. When I played soccer, I would have broken, like my nose got broken, they broke it back. Like I have very high tolerance for pain. I couldn't deal with this type of pain over a long period of time. And so if you imagine you're walking and someone just stabs you in the back, okay? You would call the police, you would scream, you'd be angry. The same thing can happen if someone cuts you with a knife, and you'd be appreciative, you would thank them, you'd even give them money. If that person was a surgeon. If we perceive that the pain that's coming to us is coming from the hand of a cold, maniacal, sadistic, cruel world that has no care for us, then we will not be able to handle the pain. But if the same cut of a knife we realize is coming from the hand of the divine surgeon, and he is healing us, not destroying us with the pain, then the very pain is not that you have to go away from sorrow to find joy. The pain will be filled with the joy. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran, it's not after hardship comes ease. Ma'a. Ma'a means with. And I'll end with the sister Layla Barakat, whose son was Dia Barakat, one of the 3 blessed souls in North Carolina who passed away. His brother was a close friend of mine. I had spent time with Dia a year before he got killed. When we went to her place in Raleigh, she said, now I understand what it means, that with the hardship comes ease. Packaged in the hardship, you can uncover the ease if you know how to. When you realize every cut came from the hand of the divine surgeon, you know that all the difficulties of life was meant to heal us, was meant for our goodness. If not in this life, we don't perceive it, definitely in the hereafter. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us a perspective and a relationship with Him that brings us healing. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to see the light in the darkness. To see that shadow is not the absence of light, but the proof of light. If anyone here is dealing with some crippling mental health or physical or any other form of pain or hardship, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring them ease. If anyone here is dealing with the greatest danger of our time, I believe, we need a war on loneliness. If anyone here is feeling deeply lonely, may they find companionship. May they know that I'm here and my wife are here as companions for them. And may we not just be attendees at events, but become brothers and sisters that care about one another. May we not just care about the person on the microphone, but care much more about the person we are with. And may we realize that the person we're sitting next to may be the khidr to our Musa, and that they have something that they will share that could transform our lives. Please join me in the recitation of Surah Asr. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wal Asr. Inna al-insana lafi khusr. Illa alladhina amanu wa amilu as-salihat. Wa tawassaw bil-haqqi wa tawassaw bis-sabr. Sorry for going long, and thank you all for listening. Jazakallah. I have a space in front.
So, thank you very much, Ustad Saad Omar. We are now going to shift into discussion circles. Before we do that, I'm going to just go over the community agreements, and then we're going to move into discussion circles because that's a bit chaotic, and I don't want to deal with that immediately. So, firstly, who here has been to Qatar before? Raise your hand. Cool, I'm going to call on you probably. Like, gotcha. So, what is one of our community agreements? Any volunteer?
Old friend mentality,
Old friend mentality, what does that mean?
that if you meet someone you haven't met them, treat them like warm, welcome, like you've known them for a while.
Yeah, and also I would even go further than that and say like you act like you've known them for a while. Because I know a lot of people, they get like really nervous and anxious around new people. But you don't need to be anxious, you don't need to be nervous. Just like, be happy with them, be chill with them, talk to them normally. What's another one?
Yes, and?
Yes, and yeah. So we don't want anyone to like explicitly disagree or negate someone else's perspective. So let them say their perspective, and then even if you disagree, you say yes, and then you say your perspective. Yes.
No, we'll step back and don't have a conversation.
Yes, it's like step back and don't hog conversations. It's yeah, step up, step back. So please so if you're scared, I want you to just like step up, say your piece, and then you step back and let someone else say their piece. And then once everybody has said something, then you can say something again. So this way everyone can say what they need to say. What's another one? Yes. What does that mean?
You asked me, you didn't ask me. You share a lot of vulnerable and so if you see someone going through a hard time, you're someone who's supportive.
That was great. Did everyone hear that? Okay, I won't repeat it then. So fantastic. What's another one? Campground rules. That is just leave the area cleaner than how you found it. So just help us pick up the chairs, pick up any trash. Even if it isn't your trash, it would help us and the baristas a lot because I don't think they like to sweep that much. What's another one? I think there's like 2, 3 more. Keep it halal, yes, that one's pretty self-explanatory. Don't keep it haram. Examples are, because these are likely going to be mixed discussion groups, so make sure you maintain proper boundaries with the other gender. And also, if you're saying a story and it involves someone who people know in the community, like don't just say their names so that everyone can identify who that person is. Try and cover up their faults, use a fake name, make sure it's ambiguous enough that no one can identify who that person is. And then I think there's 2 more, yes? Sorry, you were just adjusting your glasses, you weren't raising your hand. Maintain the amana, yeah. So if someone here shares a very vulnerable, serious story that you know they would not want you to share elsewhere, don't share it. Maintain the amana means maintain the trust. And then there's one last one. It is embrace discomfort. So it's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to talk about things that normally make you feel uncomfortable. This is a safe space, and being uncomfortable just a little bit is good for you, it's healthy, it'll make you grow. So, what we're going to do is we're going to shift into discussion circles. If you have a name tag, there should be a number on your name tag from 1 to 8, and I'm going to point out where those groups are going to be. If you don't have a name tag with a number on it, just like find the circle with the least amount of people and enjoy that. So the groups are going to be, this is going to be group 1, this is going to be group 2, this is going to be group 3, this is going to be group 4, group 5, 6, 7, and then 8's in that corner. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Sorry, area.